Do you remember? The last thing I told you? A new family had moved into the old farmhouse across the dirt road. At the time, I thought they were just another family looking for a fresh start. I never imagined that one quiet little boy would become one of the most important people in my life. His name was Daniel Carter. He was 10 years old. 1 year older than me. He wasn't loud, he wasn't popular, and he certainly wasn't the kind of boy who tried to get everyone's attention. Most days, he kept his head down, spoke only when someone spoke to him, and always seemed to carry a sadness that no child should ever have to carry. The first time I saw him, he was repairing a broken wooden fence by himself. His clothes were patched, his boots were worn out, his hands already looked like they belonged to a grown man. I remember thinking, he's just like me, a child, trying to live an adult's life. For nearly 2 weeks, we never exchanged a single word. Every morning I'd walk to school, he'd be walking on the opposite side of the road. We'd look at each other, smile politely, then keep walking. It became our strange little routine, no conversation, just two quiet children trying to survive another day. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. School had just ended. The dirt road had turned into thick mud. As I hurried home, the strap on my school bag suddenly snapped. Books, papers, and my father's precious handwritten note scattered everywhere. The wind carried pages across the road. Before I could chase them, Daniel was already running after them. He didn't say a word. He simply gathered every page, brushed the mud off each one, and handed them back to me. I smiled. "Thank you." He shrugged. "I know what it's like to lose something important." That was the very first sentence he ever spoke to me. Simple, quiet, honest. For some reason, I never forgot it. As we walked together, I noticed he was carrying an old lunch tin. It looked almost empty. "Weren't you hungry today?" I asked. He smiled a little. "I told my mother I wasn't, so my little sister could eat instead." I stopped walking. Those words sounded painfully familiar, because I'd seen my own parents do exactly the same thing. Pretend they weren't hungry, so someone else could have enough. Without thinking, I broke my sandwich in half. "Here." He looked surprised. "I can't take your lunch." "You didn't. We're sharing it." For the first time, he laughed, not loudly, just enough to make me realize he had forgotten what it felt like to smile. From that day forward, we walked to school together. We walked home together. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't, but silence never felt awkward between us, because both of us understood something most children didn't. Some people don't need words to understand each other's pain. One Saturday morning, while helping Father organize his old workshop, Daniel quietly asked, "Do you think we'll ever stop being poor?" I looked around the tiny room, at the cracked windows, the rusty tools, the unfinished furniture. Then I answered with all the confidence a 9-year-old could possibly have. "I don't know. But I know one thing. We won't stay like this forever." He smiled. "What makes you so sure?" I looked at my father's old toolbox, then back at Daniel. "Because people who never stop trying eventually find a way." Daniel held out his hand. "What if we make a promise?" "What kind of promise?" "One day, we'll both build a better life, no matter how long it takes." I smiled, then shook his hand. It seemed like a childish promise. Just two poor kids, standing in an old workshop, dreaming about a future neither of us could see. But looking back today, that handshake became the beginning of everything. Because only a few weeks later, Daniel would tell me a secret so heartbreaking, it would change the way I looked at life. Some friendships don't begin with laughter, they begin with understanding. Daniel and I never needed to pretend. We didn't have nice clothes, we didn't have expensive toys, and we certainly didn't have easy lives. But somehow, that made us understand each other better than anyone else. As spring slowly arrived, walking to school together became part of our lives. Every morning, he'd wait for me beneath the old oak tree near the dirt road. Every afternoon, we'd race each other home. Sometimes he'd win. Sometimes I'd let him think he had. For the first time since Father's illness, I started smiling again. Mother noticed. "So, who keeps making you smile these days?" I felt my cheeks grow warm. "A friend," she smiled. "Good friends are one of God's greatest gifts." At the time, I didn't realize how right she was. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel didn't meet me at the oak tree. That wasn't like him. I waited. 10 minutes, then 20, something felt wrong. So I walked across the road toward his farmhouse. The front yard was unusually quiet. No chickens, no laughter, no sound at all. As I reached the porch, I heard voices inside, angry voices. A man shouted, "I've worked all week, and we still don't have enough." Another voice, Daniel's mother, softly replied, "The children can hear you." "I don't care." The room fell silent. Then I heard something break. A plate, or maybe a cup. I couldn't tell. My heart sank. I quietly turned around to leave. Just as I stepped off the porch, Daniel came around the side of the house carrying a bucket of water. He froze when he saw me. "You heard that?" I nodded. He looked down at the ground. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize," I whispered. He sat down on the porch steps. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he took a deep breath. "My father wasn't always like this. He used to laugh. He used to tell stories. But after losing his job, everything changed. He thinks he failed us." Those words stopped me, because I had heard almost the same sentence from my own father. Different house, different family, same pain. Daniel continued quietly. "Sometimes, I pretend I'm asleep, so my little sister won't see me crying." I looked at him. Then I gently reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out Father's handwritten note, the one I'd carried everywhere since he gave it to me. Daniel read it slowly. "Never lose this heart, Ellie. One day it will be worth far more than money." He looked at me. I wish someone had written something like that for me. Without thinking, I folded the note, placed it in his hands, and smiled. "Then keep it for a while. When you stop believing, read it." His eyes filled with tears. "I can't take something that important. It's only paper. The real message is already here." I gently touched my heart. "And now, I want it to live in yours too." Years later, Daniel admitted, that little piece of paper stayed in his pocket for almost 10 years. Whenever life became difficult, he unfolded it, read it, and kept going. At the time, neither of us realized how powerful simple words could become. The following week, our teacher announced a school competition. Every student had to answer one question. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" One by one, children gave their answers. A doctor, a pilot, a movie star, a baseball player. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stood quietly, looked down, and said, "I don't care what job I have. I just want my mother to stop worrying about money." The classroom became completely silent. Even our teacher couldn't speak for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Eleanor, what about you?" I stood up slowly. I looked at Daniel, then at the class. "I want to build a home, so strong, no child inside it will ever be afraid of losing it." No one laughed. No one whispered. Even at 9 years old, every child in that classroom knew those weren't ordinary dreams, they were promises. That afternoon, Daniel and I walked home without saying much. As we reached the old oak tree, he stopped. "What if we really do it someday?" "What?" "Our dream. A home where nobody has to be afraid." I smiled. "We will." "How do you know?" "Because every great future starts with two people who refuse to stop believing." We shook hands again. The same promise, only stronger this time. But life has a way of testing promises sooner than anyone expects. Because just 3 days later, a black automobile stopped outside our school. The principal came into our classroom. He looked directly at Daniel and quietly said, "Son, you need to come with me." The look on Daniel's face is something I can still see, even 70 years later. Some moments stay with you forever, not because they lasted a long time, but because they changed everything that came after. The day the principal called Daniel out of our classroom was one of those moments. The room became completely silent. Every student turned to look at him. Daniel slowly stood up. He looked confused. "So, am I in trouble?" The principal forced a gentle smile. "No, son, just come with me." Daniel picked up his worn-out school bag. Before leaving, he looked back at me. I smiled, trying to reassure him. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. The rest of the school day felt endless. I couldn't focus on a single lesson. I kept looking toward the classroom door, hoping Daniel would return. He never did. When the final bell rang, I hurried toward his farmhouse. Halfway there, I saw Mrs. Carter waiting outside her bakery. The sadness on her face told me everything. "Eleanor, I'm afraid Daniel's mother became very ill this morning. They've taken her to the county hospital." My heart dropped. "Is she going to be okay?" Mrs. Carter sighed. "The doctors don't know yet." Without thinking, I ran. Past the dirt road, past the old church, past the grocery store, until I reached the small county hospital. It wasn't much bigger than our school. The waiting room smelled of medicine and old wood. Daniel was sitting alone on a bench. His elbows rested on his knees. His hands covered his face. For the first time I saw my strongest friend completely broken. I quietly sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes, silence says more than words ever can. After several minutes, he whispered, "I'm scared. What if she doesn't come home?" I didn't know the answer. No 9-year-old child knows how to answer questions like that. So instead, I reached over and held his hand. "You won't go through this alone." A few minutes later, the doctor walked into the waiting room. Daniel immediately stood. The doctor's expression was calm, but serious. "Your mother will recover." Daniel closed his eyes in relief. "But she'll need months of rest. No heavy work, no long days." His shoulders slowly dropped because we both knew what those words meant. No work meant no money, and no money meant another family fighting to survive. On the walk home, the sky was turning orange. Neither of us spoke much. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you ever get tired?" I smiled. "Every day." "So why do you keep going?" I looked across the fields where my father had once worked. "Because my parents never quit. If they can keep fighting, so can I." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think that's what my mother would say too." When we reached the old oak tree, we stopped. It had become our place. The place where we shared dreams, fears, and promises. Daniel bent down, picked up a small flat stone, and handed it to me. "What are we doing?" He smiled. "My grandfather used to say, if you make a promise, leave something behind to remind the earth." I laughed softly. "It sounds silly. Maybe. But I like it." We dug a tiny hole beneath the oak tree, placed the stone inside, then covered it with dirt. Daniel held out his hand. "No matter what happens, we never stop believing." I shook his hand. No matter how hard life becomes, we never give up. That simple handshake became the first promise we ever made. And unlike most childhood promises, we actually kept it. Looking back today, 70 years later, I still visit that old oak tree whenever I return to my hometown. The tree is enormous now. Its branches stretch farther than we ever imagined our lives would. Sometimes, I stand there quietly and remember 2 poor children who believed hope was stronger than hardship. In many ways, they were right. But life wasn't finished testing us. Only a few weeks later, summer arrived. School ended, and Father finally felt strong enough to return to his workshop for a few hours each day. We thought maybe our lives were finally beginning to heal. Then one afternoon, a shiny black automobile stopped outside our house. Not the bank, not the doctor, someone else. A well-dressed gentleman stepped out, holding a leather folder. He smiled at Father and said, "Mr. Brooks, I've been looking for a carpenter exactly like you." None of us realized it then, but that unexpected visitor would open a door that could change our family's future forever. And that, my sweethearts, is the story I'll tell you in part 4.